Right, I think we'll get started. So my name is Sharon Peacock and I'm the Master of Churchill College. And thank you for coming tonight and for supporting the Churchill College Masters Book Club series, where we feature some of the books written by our college academics. So this is our second event, and I'm really delighted to welcome Professor Sir David Spiegelhalter, whose latest book is entitled The Art of Uncertainty: How to Navigate Chance, Ignorance, Risk and Luck. Before I begin, I'd like to really pay special thanks to the people who've done an amazing job in organising the event this evening. So Phoebe Ryan, Amy Chapman, Annabelle Busher, and our incredible college librarian, Annie Gleeson. So before David takes the floor, I want to say a few words about him and his career. So David is currently an Emeritus Professor of Statistics in Cambridge and a Fellow of Churchill College. So between 2016 and 2023, he was chair of the Winton Centre for Risk and Evidence Communication in Pure Maths and Mathematical Statistics Department. And David, you focused on improving the way that quantitative evidence is used in society. And I'm sure you'll be talking more about that over the next hour. So in the decade before that, David was the Winton Professor for the Public Understanding of Risk in the Statistical Lab in the Centre of Mathematical Sciences, and you're also the President of the Royal Statistical Society between 2017 and 2018. So David, you're a highly decorated scientist. You became a Fellow of the Royal Society in 2005, the recipient of the Weldon Memorial Prize from the University of Oxford in 2010, and David, you were knighted in 2014 for services to medical statistics. And you've also been given many honorary doctorates. So David has appeared extensively on radio and TV, and this has included Desert Island Discs, if you'd like to learn more about David's life, and also Life Scientific with Jim Al-Khalili. So I note on your personal website that your proudest achievement in 2011, when you said you did, in your words, moderately well in the first and only series of Winter Wipeouts on BBC One. So you took on the dark guise of Professor Risk, and there's a YouTube clip of your performance, which I can heartily recommend. Now, if you don't know what a winter wipeout is, it's basically an assault course balanced above a large pool of water. And the idea is that the participants end up in the water. And so I was particularly amused by the commentator, Richard Hammond, who said that when you fell, you should have been following the y-axis, but instead you followed the x-axis, which I thought was actually quite inspired. But you might tell us more about that later. But the first time I heard David speak was when he was explaining the risk of bacon sandwiches. So this was in 2011, and he was unpacking a statistic being reported in the papers that people who ate a bacon sandwich every day had an increased risk of 20% of getting bowel cancer during their lifetime. So he referred to this as the Great Bacon Sandwich Debate, and that also is on the internet. It's well worth it, particularly if you're a bacon sandwich eater. So turning to this evening now, in a moment I will invite David to give a presentation for around 15 minutes. He and I will then get into a one-to-one conversation for around 20 or 25 minutes, and then we'll open up for questions from you, our audience. So we'll close at 7 when there'll be a reception in the buttery. Do feel free to spill out onto the grass by the Jock Colville. There are tables there and some shade. And also David will tell us about the books he'll have on sale, where you can purchase and actually have a signed copy. But you'll tell us more about that, David. So I'd like to welcome you and invite you to come and give your presentation, which I think will be not necessarily a straightforward presentation, but I'm really looking forward to what you're going to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sharon, thank you so much. And I should say, of course, if you want a really good Desert Island disc, listen to Sharon's. It's a cracker. It really is. Okay, thanks very much. Great fun to be here in front of all these people in your summer. Oh, I can take my jacket off. In your summer garb. So thank you. Now I got to hold me. Hang on, I got to hold my belly in as well. Right. Yeah, that's me, and that's the book. And so 2 Fridays, double yolk egg on the front, and that's the stuff that's in the book And, when you look through it, I looked at it and I'm slightly embarrassed because I realized that it's just everything I'm interested in strung together. Uh, and I think into a reasonably coherent narrative arc, but actually it's what I'm interested in. And what I actually think are important, and some of this is like, we could talk later about luck and coincidences, things like that, are, really of quite general interest. And some of it is slightly more technical about models and things. I'm going to talk a bit about that as well. But I'm just going to whip through a few things first to start with. And the first thing is, what is uncertainty? Now, I stole this definition, which I really like, the conscious awareness of ignorance. And the point about that is that it puts it fair and square as something that we own, our uncertainty. I regard it as a relationship, between us and the outside world, and we may be uncertain about the future, about what's happened in the past, about why things happened. We live in a world of ignorance. We are uncertain about so much. And what I talk about in the book is that uncertainty has got, as a relationship, it's got lots of aspects to it. It's got an object of the uncertainty, what we're uncertain about, because we are the subject. But it's also got a means of expression, which might be probability, or it might be words like likely or could. And it's got a source, why are we uncertain? And it's also got what I might call a feeling associated with it. How do we feel being about it? Who likes being uncertain? Oh, really? None. So you'll want to know what you're going to get for Christmas? When you're watching, a thriller, a box set, you always just look at the last episode, see what happens. Oh, I see. So you do quite like uncertainty. Okay, if I could tell you, who would want to know when they were going to die? Oh, there's always a few. Yeah, it's usually about 1 in 20 or something like that. Put their hands up and if I asked them, I think it'd say because I like to be able to plan and know things, et cetera, et cetera. But look, the rest of you don't want to know. You love uncertainty. We live in it. We are as human beings. Would you like to live in a life that is totally predictable? Can you think of anything worse? Ghastly, absolutely horrible. It'd be like being in a cell. In fact, if you were in a cell, I suppose it would be fairly predictable. So it uncertainty does have those. Of course, people can get very upset about uncertainty. There's intolerance of uncertainty scales, and if you score highly enough, it becomes a clinical condition of anxiety. Okay, but we can think about what kind of uncertainty we might have, and the first type of uncertainty is what I might call aleatory or chance. So here's a coin. I'm going to flip this coin. What's the probability it's going to be heads? 50-50. Right. That's aleatory uncertainty. Chance we can't know. But the next, now I've flipped it and covered it up, now this is epistemic uncertainty. It's what we don't know. There's no randomness now. It's fixed. It's just we don't know it. So what's your probability that this is heads? Yeah, quite quick. Bit grudging. Got there in the end. It's still a half. But actually, that is showing two very different interpretations of probability. Yeah, I could say the second is a Bayesian interpretation when we can apply probabilities to our ignorance, so what we don't know. And I'm going to show in a moment you can do that. But actually, one thing I should say is, Sharon, could you just have a look at that coin? Yep, it's an absolutely beautiful two-headed £2 coin with Queen Elizabeth's head on both sides. It's beautifully made, strictly illegal. And what it shows is that when you said that, you were so cocky before I flipped the coin, 50-50, you said, oh, you were wrong. You were deluded. You trusted me. Oh, no. So what I'm supposed to show from that is that any probability, actually any number you come up with, it's always an assessment, it's a judgment based on assumptions and what you know. And that is true in this situation, and it's true throughout science, completely. In every area where a numerical probability is expressed, it's always constructed on the basis of assumptions and our knowledge. I, in fact, in the book, go even further and say that I don't even believe probability exists anyway. I think we just made it up. That's why it was so late in coming to the 1650s, because we had to make up the idea. You can't see a probability. You can't measure it. It's not like time or temperature or anything like that. There's no probabilityometer. And this is quite an extreme point of view, which I've held for 50 years and have no intention of shifting from. And I even I wrote a paper, Does Probability Exist? This is just last year in Nature. Probably not, but it's useful to act as if it does. And that's what I truly believe, and I argue in the book. So this is a slight aside, except possibly at the quantum level. Not even convinced about that. Well, some people aren't convinced about that. And then I noticed it is in the Christmas edition. So I wonder whether it's put in as a sort of joke. Anyway, it certainly caused some, a little bit of fuss. So that's what I personally believe. Okay, now, but I did talk about uncertainty and expressions of uncertainty. And we're all used to saying, oh, things could happen or maybe happen. And my first argument is that that is really dangerous in serious problems. And I refer to the Bay of Pigs. Some of you, by the look of some of you, you remember the Bay of Pigs very well. In 1959, Castro's revolution in Cuba, and immediately the CIA started plotting an invasion by 1,500 Cuban exiles at the Bay of Pigs on the south coast of Cuba. I've been there. It's a very nice, beautiful resort now. It wasn't in that time. And the point is, this was all secret. The US Army didn't know about it, and Kennedy didn't know about it till he became president in 1961. Suddenly he found out about this. And he thought, whoa, this doesn't sound a great idea. And he commissioned the intelligence report by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And they didn't think it was a very good idea. They thought it was about a 30% chance of success they came up with. So, they really were pretty pessimistic about it. Now, the real problem is that number, by the time the report got to Kennedy, that number had disappeared and had been replaced by a phrase, a fair chance of success. What? And, this, it seems, they meant not very good. Well, why did they use that phrase? Anyway, in the end, Kennedy approved the invasion. That's not the only reason. There's a huge groupthink. There was nobody really questioning it. And of course, it was a complete fiasco. There's Castro jumping off a tank in the counterattack that they did at Bay of Pigs. All the invaders were killed or captured, and complete embarrassment, and drove Cuba more into Russia's influence, and led, you could say, to the Cuban Missile Crisis the following year, pretty well the closest we've come to a nuclear war. So this was a total disaster, and in the post-mortem where people have gone through it, a lot of it is put. Why didn't somebody say this has got a very low chance of success? Okay, so the crucial thing, words are really easily misunderstood, and people have learned that. Intelligence have learned that as well. It's best to at least roughly define words. So for the UK intelligence services, MI5 or MI6, JTAC, if you use the word likely, you must mean between 55 and 75% probability. And how do I remember that? Well, I gave a talk at MI5, and all I got was this lousy mug. It's my MI5 mug. And this is how they remember it, because it says, if your coffee level is down to here, 55 to 75% empty, you're likely or probable to need a refill. Isn't that great? I mean, that's how the intelligence services work, clearly. So, and the point is, well, just by looking at that mug, you see that if they thought there really was only a 30% chance of success, they have to use the word unlikely. They have to use that, and that may have helped a lot. Now, 50 years after the Bay of Pigs in 2011, things had changed. An equally difficult decision by a president there was intelligence, but no definitive identification that Osama bin Laden was in the compound in Abbottabad in Pakistan. And Obama did two brilliant things. He set multiple intelligence teams to look at the evidence and assess a probability that he was there. Not that the raid would be a success, but that he was actually there. Pure epistemic uncertainty. Is he there or not? Complete epistemic uncertainty. And Obama later on said some thought it was 30 to 40%, others thought it was about as high as 80 to 90%. And 30, 40%, they may have been actually a red team, is what's called. People set up to take a deliberately pessimistic view. And the 80 to 90% of people, oh yeah, gung-ho. And he heard all these opinions, and he said in the end, I think it's basically 50-50. I hope he didn't say that because either he's there or he isn't. But, it was a sort of average, and he approved the raid, and it was a success. It's been argued since in academic papers, and have been actually argued for that, saying that those different teams should have got together beforehand and come up with a single view for the president, for the decision maker, which I argue in the book is absolutely inappropriate, wrong. A responsible decision maker should know the variation among his advisors because that is a major source of the uncertainty. Okay, quantify. Let's do a little quiz. Are you ready? Get your brains out. I want to show that you can quantify your epistemic uncertainty. I want to know whether you know how ignorant you really are. Because, I see a wave of ignorance coming off this audience, and I want to know whether you realize it. Okay, I'm going to ask a series of questions. Each one has got an A or B answer. Think, which ones do you prefer if you had to bet on one? But I'm going to allow you, rather than giving an answer, and I don't want to hear, and I don't want any comments. Shush. No phones, no Wikipedia, no conferring. You've got to say how confident you are on a scale 5 to 10. So if you're absolutely certain it's A, you've got to say 10 out of 10 to yourself. And if you haven't got a clue, you can say 5. And then I give you the answer, and you score yourself according to this scoring rule, which is a work of absolute beauty. It's a wonderful thing. And it's a scoring rule. It's essentially used in all the super forecasting competitions. It's used to evaluate weather forecasters. It's used to evaluate intelligence analysts. It's brilliant. So if you say 10 out of 10 and you're right, you get 25. If you say 10 out of 10 and you're wrong, you lose 75. Whoa. It's really vicious, teacher, this one. It punishes failure. Really does. And then it's 24, 21, as you go down, you say 6. If you're right, you get 9. You're wrong, you lose 11. Okay, and so special prize to the person who can spot the formula behind that rule before I'm going to tell you at the end of the quiz. Right, first quiz. Who's older, the Prince of Wales or the Princess of Wales? Shh, no Wikipedia. Which one do you think, if you had to bet, really had to bet on one, which would you choose? And how confident are you on a scale 5 to 10? Have you done that in your head? Right? And the answer is B. Okay. Anyone, if you thought 10 out of 10, William, you've got off to a really bad start. And it's going to be difficult to make it up. Next, which is close to Cambridge by road using Google Maps, Birmingham or Canterbury. Just putting the names in and looking at the shortest distance on Google Maps. Birmingham or Canterbury, right? Are you ready? Have you made your judgment and how confident you are? And the answer is A. Just. Is a bit nasty. I guess those. No, not Canterbury, New Zealand. I told you, Herbert. Speak to the hat. Okay. So, all right, next, which capital is furthest north, Brussels or Kiev? Further north, it should be, sorry. Brussels or Kiev, which is further north? How confident are you in your answer? Have you done that in your head? And which is the answer? B. I mean, it's a real stinker, that is. It's that much further north. But it is. Kiev is further north than Brussels. Okay. Which is bigger, Venus or Earth? Absolutely standard. God, everybody in the audience must know this. Sure. All you nerds out. Which is bigger, Venus or Earth? And the answer is, have you done your little sum? And the answer is B. B. Okay. Finally, in which year, maybe, Winston Churchill resigned as Prime Minister? 1955 or 1956? 1955 or 1956, when Eden took over. Fine. And the answer is A. Maybe that was a bit easy for some people. Oh, good. Okay, so have you done that? You could work. I'm not going to go around asking scores, but I'm going to ask, who got lots? Anyone get above 50 points? Wow, very good. You're either lucky or you know a lot. So that's really good. Was anyone quite cautious? Stayed around, just used, stayed around 6s or 7s or 5s and stayed around. Yeah, very good. These are really good people. These are great, trustworthy people because they know what they don't know. Yeah. There is another sort of person who got negative points. Hooray! A chimpanzee could have done better than that just by putting 5 for everything. Now, I'm not going to embarrass somebody by going around finding someone who made a really big negative score. When I do this with school kids, it's great because there's always some 15-year-old boys who get about minus 300 or something. So, but the point is, if you've got anyone with a really big negative score, these are people who don't know what they don't know. These are not the sort of people you want as your financial advisors. Now, the point of this is these things are serious. They're used to train people to have humility. This is what it's all about, humility, which I mentioned in the book a lot. What's the formula behind the rule? Okay, think of the most you can get is 25. So what are you losing by your error of not getting it exactly right? Well, you're losing either 1 or 4 or 9 or 16 or 25 or 36 or 49, 64, 81, 100. What are those numbers? There's the square numbers. Cool. The guy in the front found out, the boy in the front, they're squared. It's squared error loss. That's all it is. Squared error loss, standard loss function, error function for measurement error. And this was developed by meteorologist Breyer in 1950, and it's just taken over. It's just a brilliant rule to use. Okay, right. Oh, just to finish off now, because I want to get on to the questions, jumping into statistical analysis, modeling, which is what I do and what you do. There are a lot of you do and things like that. And you do your work and you calculate, you put in the software and out comes a confidence interval and you claim that that's your uncertainty. No, it isn't. I just want to say I've done this for 50 years and it isn't. Nothing that comes out of the computer is a true measure of uncertainty. And here's an example. This is estimates of the speed of light over the last 100 years with their claimed margins of error. And you notice that for about 40 years, the estimates, the margins of error do not include the currently accepted value. And these are supposed to be physical constants. And this is true for almost all physical constants. The estimated margins of error are far too low. People in the 1930s were coming up with all sorts of ideas about why light is slowing down. Anyway, but the argument now is moot, because since 1984, the speed of light has been fixed to the meter. So meter is defined in terms of the speed of light. They're inextricably connected now. So there can never be any more discussion about what the speed of light is. It is fixed by the meter is defined in terms of the speed of light. Okay, so margins of error measurement assumptions, which are incorrect. Okay, intervals are too narrow. And we had a lovely example of this in the pandemic. I think it's about my last slide. Remember the R number? Yeah. You could also almost get nostalgic about it, couldn't you? Every week there it was, some politician getting up talking, what you haven't got a clue what he was talking about. And yet he was quoting these numbers. So the R number is the average number of people you'd expect someone with COVID to go on and infect. And there were in the country, they did an Obama. They had 8 different teams estimating this quantity and quantifying their uncertainty about R. 8 different, there was, Empiricus, but the strong Cambridge group, the Warwick, 8 different, using 12 different models of every different sort. Some of them really simple, some incredibly complex agent-based models and things like that. And once a week they got together and compared their estimates. And this, for 1 week, were their estimates. Now, they don't even overlap the intervals. And yet they're trying to estimate the same quantity from essentially the same data. They don't even overlap. They are all wrong. All those intervals are wrong. They're all too narrow because they assume the truth of the model, and all models are wrong. So all these probability intervals are constructed on the basis of assumptions and judgments which are wrong. So we can't believe any of these, and it's just as well you had 12 teams. What if you only had 1 team doing it? So, and they all got together at the end of the week and came up with a pooled value. And as, of course, the master knows, during COVID, there's this massive group effort with enormous amounts of collaboration. And I've heard about the group meetings were extremely collaborative. There weren't people arguing, yeah, my model is best. There were people saying, wow, only this week we've done it very well. We're not sure. We don't think we've really captured what's going on. There's a lot of humility in that discussion when they came up with it. So that has led me to, for 2 things: the importance of multiple perspectives and never believing a calculated uncertainty interval. It's always too narrow. Okay, so I'm going to shut up now and take some questions. Sorry, I went on a bit long.
Put your jacket in there.
Sorry, Sharon.
That's all right. That's fine.
Just throw it.
Absolutely fine. Well, so we'll do some sort of one-to-one conversation, and then we'll throw out to the audience for questions. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions, but I'm going to start by asking you, how important is luck in our lives?
Yeah. Now, I do talk about luck quite a lot. And one thing I should say is writing this book changed my life. Absolutely changed my life. researching about just right. I start with the introduction. There's a story about my grandfather who was in the First World War, and he exemplifies the three different types of luck that philosophers have identified. And the first one is what's called constitutive luck, which is the most important bit of luck, which is just who you're born as. And we didn't choose who we're born as; out we came. And in a particular time with our particular parents that we didn't choose, in a particular place in history, time of with events, and yet it actually dominates and is the most enormous influence there. The whole of the rest of our life are all those things we didn't control. He had the bad constitutive luck of being born really just in time to go into the First World War. And then the second type of luck is what's known as circumstantial luck, which is being during your life, being at the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time. And he ended up as brigade gas officer in the Ypres salient just after the Battle of Passchendaele, which is a terrible circumstantial luck, if you call it. I'm not sure whether he actually applied for the job, but it was a really dangerous job. And it must have very low life expectancy or whatever. And he actually was shelled. We got his diary or his entries about how awful the place was. And in the end, he was shelled. Inevitably, a shell got him on his walking around inspecting the gas facilities. But the third type of luck is outcome luck, which is just how, in that particular moment, how things just happened to work out for you. Maybe not the same as the person next to you, or whatever, that particular bit. And he had fantastic outcome luck, because as you can tell, he survived. He survived and he was declared B2 and put behind the lines, and so he avoided having to go over the top, which is the battalion had to do twice in the subsequent year. And so he was, he's incredible. And I'm only here because of all that fantastic luck. There's also existential luck, of course, which is just the luck of even existing. And in the book, I do talk about my own conception, which I've studied in great detail. And which is quite fascinating. I do recommend thinking about it. It's a bit difficult because one doesn't like to think about those things, even at the age of 71. So, but I did. Okay, the joke is that I studied the weather records at the time I was conceived, and it was really cold. And my parents were living in a pretty well an unheated cottage, and so here I am.
And we're very glad of it too. So, you've talked about luck, but you don't have to be on social media very long to realize that people think about their lives differently. So, for example, some people believe in destiny. So you can't change anything that comes along. It just is what it is. And then there are others who think it's really about determinism. So what you did in the past actually really determines your future, which is like two ends of the spectrum. You can do nothing to change it, or you can do everything to change it. So what do you think about that?
Oh, yeah. I talk about that quite a lot because you have got, a wide range of views really about causality, about why things happen. Is it, there's a sort of slightly more Buddhist view of karma that things happen because of a long chain of dependent events that lead to what's happening now. You got the idea that, it's just chance, or goddess Fortuna, looking down on us, or just randomness. People say, it's just chance, whatever that is. Which is just sort of luck taken personally. You got others who think that everything's predestined. If you take some religious groups will think that, or it's all the will of God, or whatever. And I say I couldn't care less. Absolutely makes no difference to me whatsoever what you think are the underlying reasons for the uncertainty. We are uncertain about what's going to happen, whether it's all predestined, whether it's all the will of God, whether there's genuine randomness. We just don't know. And the interesting thing is determinism, again, which I feel I've had really changed my mind on this, because, Laplace's demon, Laplace, back in the early 18th century said, if we knew the position and velocity of every particle, we could predict the future and everything, because he didn't know about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. And also, not just because of that, I think, but even just because of chaos, it's wrong to think that determinism means predictability. Because people do think, his will's deterministic, therefore we can predict. No, we can't. We can't predict what's going to happen in chaotic situations. Lottery balls bouncing around is essentially deterministic. A roulette table is deterministic. It's all obeys Newtonian mechanics. It's just staggeringly complicated and totally unpredictable if it's done properly. So we need to distinguish that, and that's why it's the unpredictability I'm interested in, not whether it's genuinely deterministic or not, whatever that whatever that means. Yeah. So I'm taking I got a completely pragmaticist, is also known as, approach to all of this. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make any difference to what I do or what I think or how I assess my probabilities. I don't care.
Mm. That's very thought-provoking. I'm going to take us into government now and public policy.
Yeah.
So, politicians have to talk about some exceptionally tough challenges. I mean, the pandemic, climate change, balancing the financial books, and there's a huge amount of uncertainty related to those. So, from your experience, how well do politicians handle uncertainty?
I think you know what I'm going to say.
I have to ask the question,
Yeah.
then, right?
No, they're absolutely hopeless. No, I mean, they cannot admit uncertainty, and I think it's a variety of reasons. First of all, they don't know how to, because they do. I mean, I can't believe they're so daft as to not to realise the enormous uncertainties about the effects of policies and so on. Of course, they know that, but and they've been told that. They should have been warned about that. And so, but they feel, I think, two things. They don't have a language for expressing it. And also, I think they have this myth that if we admit uncertainty, nobody will trust us. They'll just go for somebody who says, I'm certain about what's going to happen. So they find this impossible to do. And in science, because we're used to admitting uncertainty and for it not to decrease trust. And during COVID, you could just see the difference at these ghastly, horrible, briefings between, what Boris Johnson was saying. And I think, Chris Whitty in particular was rather good at expressing uncertainty. Jonathan Van Tam was extremely good at it, at acknowledging we don't know everything and so on. And because in a way they're used to doing it in their work, we're used to doing it as scientists. And so I think politicians got a real problem with that. And the person in the book I really go on about who really nailed this, I think, was John Krebs, Lord Krebs, when he was head of the Food Standards Agency. And he had to deal with crisis after crisis. BSE, mad cow, foot and mouth, everything. One disaster after another. And he developed a complete playbook of how to deal with that with the public, these crises, which he wrote about afterwards in an interview. And he said, first of all, I tell people, what we know. Yes, we are confident about this. So you start with that. And then you say, well, we don't know. What are the gaps in our knowledge? And then you say, your uncertainty. Then you say what we're doing about it. Yes, we're trying to resolve this. We're doing this experiments. We're doing that. Then you say what people can do in the meantime. So you give your advice to people, what they can do in the meantime. But the fifth one is the most crucial one, which is say our advice will probably change as we learn more. So it's provisionality. And that's the one that politicians seem to be absolutely incapable of saying. And it led in COVID to the disastrous things about, all the sort of, hand washing and wiping surfaces and things, which we knew by April 2020 was pretty well a complete waste of time. And nobody told us. They carried on and people were still wiping surfaces and they didn't go into saying about fresh air till nearly a year later as being part of the mantra. And it all came out in those ghastly WhatsApp messages from Matt Hancock and others that they said, we cannot change our mind because people will accuse us of eating. And I think that is desperately untrustworthy and no longer, no wonder people have really questioned, what they were told during the pandemic.
I want to stay on the pandemic for a moment because I remember that you produced this incredible graphic which showed the risk of harm from having a vaccination based on your age. And that was really influential. Is there a backstory to how that came to be?
Yes. I should have got it up to show people. But it was, we're on. It was when this AstraZeneca vaccine was being linked to blood clots, and people like Macron were saying, we're not going to give this vaccine to older people, which was totally the wrong decision. It's an absolutely ridiculous thing to say, because Jonathan Van Tam was going to do a public briefing on the BBC on the Wednesday, and on Monday, John Aston, fellow here, and Alex Freeman, now Baroness Freeman, we were asked by the MHRA to do some analysis and produce some for that meeting. We got the data on the blood clots and we fitted a Poisson regression and found that the risk went up as you got younger. It definitely did go up as you got younger. But John had already had a good model for what the benefits of the vaccine were in terms of intensive care visits prevented. And of course, the benefits got massive as you get older. The benefits are absolutely minimal for young people. So the graphic just showed that when you're old, in the 60s or so, the benefit, risk ratio is enormously in favor of the vaccine. Stick it in me. But as you got younger, the benefits went down and the risks went up. By the time you got to in your 20s, they'd crossed. They'd crossed. And so Jonathan Van Tam, who did it brilliantly because it was complicated, because you have to look at it by age. But he took the audience through it in a trustworthy way, treating the audience with respect. And he said, so we're not recommending that young people don't get the vaccine. And everyone nodded their head and said, thank you very much. There were no accusations of U-turn. The press completely accepted it, and everyone copied our graphic.
I think it was a brilliant graphic. I do remember looking at it and going, wow, that's really influential. So if you're Prime Minister, what would you do differently? Your next career.
Yeah, no, definitely not. No, I could never do anything like that. Oh, I think that to take notice of the increasing amount of research on trustworthy communication of evidence, and which our team did in the Winton Centre, lots of other people have done, is that you've got to be a reasonably trusted source to start with. But if you're a reasonably trusted source, the evidence is that you can communicate uncertainty, talk about the benefits and harms, talk about how good the evidence is, and so on, and be open about that. And not only does it not it doesn't decrease trust. It actually increases trust in the people who are most skeptical, because finally they are getting a message that seems to, as if they've been listened to, what their concerns were. Whereas if you just go around banging vaccines are safe and effective, which I think is close to misinformation as a claim, because vaccines are safe enough and effective enough to give to some people in some circumstances. That is the truth. And so, to say vaccines are safe and effective is a persuasive message, which only alienates people who are skeptical. Whereas and we prove this with randomized trials, that if you actually say, well, these vaccines, for some people, these are the possible harms, and this is the uncertainties and things like that, it raises the trust among skeptics. And we've been banging on about that, and I'm banging on about that in the civil service. All I can do, first of all, to try to convince the policy profession and the civil service but they are very amenable to that, to be open about the uncertainty. And eventually, hopefully, to get through to those actually in some power, that by putting these simplistic messages, treating the audience as if they're children, not listening to the concerns that people have got, you make it worse.
Well, I'd vote for you as Prime Minister, I have to say. Yes, joke. So I'm going to have one more question before we open it up to our audience. It really rounds off our conversation. And so just thinking about, you talk a lot about what it is to be human, really, in your book. It really connects to the humanness of who we are. And we all want to be, happy and healthy. The problem is that there's a bit of a tension there, isn't there? Because what makes us happy doesn't always make us healthy, and vice versa. And it comes back to your bacon sandwich debate. So how do we balance out doing things that make us happy and healthy?
It's the balance. Yeah, it's a balance, because, and I also actually think in the end they're not really contradictory, because if you're unhealthy, you're unlikely to be very happy. And so, but if all you care about is adding your years to life rather than adding life to years, then I don't think it's necessarily going to bring happiness. When you see the extent of things people do to optimize you're a bit of an optimizer. So, you with all your worries, but you optimize their health, and I think it is a balance. Like in all these things, it's a trade-off. So the bacon sandwich, it's a 20% increased risk for the daily bacon sandwich, and but the baseline risk is only about 6%. So that means 100 people eating a bacon sandwich a day for their entire lives. Instead of 6 getting bowel cancer, 7 will get bowel cancer. So that's 100 people. I don't know how many. That's about 1 million bacon sandwiches. 100 people eating, stuffing their gob with a bacon sandwich. Can you think of anything worse? All of that going down, and you get 1 extra bowel cancer. And you think, actually, in the grand scheme of things, that is not huge. And so basically, I've cut down on my bacon, but I haven't given it up.
That's a great way to finish, and we all think differently of bacon now. So thank you very much. And so at this point, we're going to open it up for any questions.
Except from him.
Got your hand up already there.
I might let him have one near the end. No.
Just because you can't answer my question.
I don't want to answer your questions. They shouldn't have let you in.
how probability could be like, there's no such thing as probability, but surely like on social media platforms like YouTube, getting subscribers and followers will be probability, because it, as long as the right people who will like that content watch it, then it's all sort of based on luck who has the most subscribers.
Yeah, and I think that you're right that there is uncertainty, and there are things that it can increase the chances of stuff, like getting subscribers on social media or increasing your risk of bowel cancer by eating lots of bacon. So now I've no doubt that and I said immediately the chances of things happen. So I think it is a very useful thing to act as if there are such things as chances out there to talk about. Their chances are increased. I just don't actually believe that there are true numbers sitting out there in the world. So I think I use probabilities all the time, but I always think of them as assessing a number rather than estimating some true underlying quantity. I've got the chance of me having a heart attack or stroke in the next 10 years. Well, I take my statins and my blood pressure, but it's still probably about 10, 12% or something like that. But I don't believe, it's a useful number, but I don't think you could open me up and see that 10, 12%. I don't believe there is some true number sitting there. It's a slightly philosophical idea. So it's very useful to act as if chances exist, but I don't believe they actually do. Good question, thank you.
Yes, in the middle.
Thank you for a great talk. We have an unprecedented amount of access to information these days, but people are more and more depressed and anxious throughout the world. Is ignorance bliss?
Oh, that's really interesting. Oh God, I think it's out of my pay grade, really. No, that really is. So, well, what I wanted to point out is that we do live in a world of uncertainty the whole time. We live our lives with uncertainty, and we actually relish it. So I think that's the first thing to recognize. Now, and I mean, maybe knowing a huge amount of stuff that you can't actually do anything about can, of course, make you, can affect your mood. And I think it does affect your mood. But I think even if you didn't know very much, lots of other stuff could affect your mood just from, the people immediately around you. So in a sense, I think it's all to do with resilience to both the information we receive, whether it's from just friends and relations around us, they could be depressing enough. Goodness me. Sorry. Let alone when you turn on the news, you'll see social media. So what I do think, especially for young people, what it's vital is to do is to develop resilient strategies for resilience. Oh, I know. I learned something after I wrote the book, which I wish I'd included, because a therapist told me about this concept of safe uncertainty. And it's developed into therapy in the 1990s, because the view of therapy, what some therapists realized, that people had a naive view of therapy, because they said people are coming to us in a situation of feeling of unsafe uncertainty, panic attacks. They don't understand what's going on. They don't feel in control at all, and they're feeling really anxious about it. They've lost all their control in their lives, and they were expecting the therapist to cure them, to turn them into a situation of safe certainty. Oh yeah, I now understand everything. I'm completely in control of my life, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, this is a delusion. People shouldn't feel that this is possible. And so they developed this idea of safe uncertainty. And that's what to try to get people into the situation, so that you still can't control everything that's going to happen. You're still going to have all this stuff coming at you, but you develop strategies and resilience to that, so you can be safe within that uncertainty. And now those ideas have developed much more into sort of policy measures in child protection and things like that, that authoritative bodies should be aimed for safe uncertainty, and also known as authoritative doubt, that you cannot be certain, you cannot be in control, but you've built resilience to what might happen to you. And I think it's such a good idea. So I now think what we should be trying to develop in people, young people in particular, is safe uncertainty. So to acknowledge you're not in control, things are going to hit you all the time from all over the place, but to have some resilience to dealing with it. So it's a good phrase, that.
And rather priceless answer to Will's question. So thank you for that. Okay. Yes.
We can allow him a question. Just one. Short.
Next.
So before you talked a bit about chance and random, but do you think anything is actually truly random?
Yes.
Yeah, round of applause
Okay,
for that
are there
one.
any quantum physicists in the audience? The only things that one could consider truly random would be at a subatomic level. And it is suggested that there are sort of absolutely objective, determined probabilities at that level, that there is, meaning completely unconditional, nothing else you know could change the probability of that radioactive decay or that particle doing this, that, and the other. And I think I believe that there is genuinely randomness there. Whether that there are genuine and true probabilities is another matter, because there's this idea of relative quantum mechanics and things which I don't know much about, but would say that any probabilities are dependent on the observer as well, in the context in which you're measuring them. So although there is true randomness, any actual numbers you might put on that, again, is dependent, is conditional on the observer and the context. So is this idea, is there any actual unconditional probabilities, which is true randomness? And I would I think it's still up for argument whether there are. But things like, random number generators, unless they're based on a quantum or even possibly light photon stuff, and lotteries and roulette, they're not random. They're just incredibly complicated, and which makes them wonderfully unpredictable.
What a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, really good. Difficult.
Yes.
Difficult.
So I think.
Oh, go on,
Yes,
Herbert. Come on.
yes.
Short one. Give him one.
I take it you're friends.
No. But he always sits in the front row and asks questions. Come on, Herbert. Tell me.
As always, a wonderful and imaginative talk, David. But can I say, right at the beginning, when you did the business with the coin, you then said, and science is like that. And I'm going to complain about that. I must say, I would have bet a fortune that you had a double-headed coin. I know you well enough to know that would happen. And that sort of thing, I think, plays a large role in science. Some people are fabulous like you, and they make good decisions and good results and do imaginative things. And some people just have no idea, and it doesn't matter how often they'll do an experiment, they won't do it right because they don't understand what's going on.
Yeah. No, I think, and that again, I think reinforces, because the standard scientific output is a p-value and a confidence interval and all that stuff. Now, those don't exist. They are constructed on the basis of assumptions. I could make any p-value small or big, just by fiddling with things and making different decisions and stuff like that. So they're all constructs. And some people use that procedure, that construction method, more reliably and more trustworthy way than others. Some will just endlessly tweak everything until they got p less than 0.05, and others will actually be much more trustworthy. It may report a range of results, for example, a sensitivity analysis. And so I think you're absolutely right that science is full of judgments. It's full of judgments all the time, and even the outputs of science, when they're statistical and are full of judgments. So, thank you.
Very good.
We're friends again.
Yes, please.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, we're surrounded by statistics all the time. So I have kind of two questions. One is, how well do our MPs understand maths and statistics? And if you were when you're Prime Minister, how would you reform the National Statistics Office?
Yeah, I am on the board of the National Statistics, so I have to be a little bit careful what I say about that, because they've been under a lot of attack recently because of some of the economic stats, etc. And there'll be more on that. But they have just decided there's going to be another census in 2031, which I think is a good decision. So that's a good thing that's been reported. No, but politicians, no, they're not very good. They're all sort of PPE people, and their numerical skills are not great, and their probability skills are terrible, worse than chimpanzees. And so, that is a problem. But again, and same with lawyers, but for a lot of these people, professionals who aren't very good at this stuff, I don't even mind if they're not very good at stuff, as long as they know they're not very good at it and go to someone who does know. I gave a talk to the Bar Council conference this week, last week, and I said, I don't mind if you do. It was about p-values and stuff. I was talking about Letby, I was talking about all sorts of things, Corby, and all sorts of stuff. And I said, I don't mind if you don't know this stuff because it's quite tricky, but you should know you don't know and find someone who does and realize what you don't know. Have that, I have mentioned the word humility quite a lot. And that's what these people in authority need, the humility. You go and talk to someone who does know what. So they don't have to be able to know how to do it, but they should know that they don't know and to ask people. So I do talks to, even give talks to ministers on data masterclasses and things like that. And a lot of that's not to do with you can't do this, but what questions to ask of your analysts and things like that. And that's what they should know, is how to use the analysts, and what is it reasonable to expect, and so on. So that they should know, I think, because that's an integral part of modern life, is dealing with the huge amounts of data that we're exposed to.
Statistics are more thinking about what extra funding should they have.
Oh, pots of it.
And how can you make sure that the surveys they use and the data they use.
Oh, well, surveys are difficult because people won't answer surveys. And this is across the world. It's been particularly bad on the economic surveys, but they've been going down anyway, and then got worse during COVID. So people won't answer surveys. So one thing is, of course, make the survey response compulsory, as for business surveys and for the census. So that's one option, which I think is fairly reasonable, in fact. It is one. People don't like doing surveys. So that is a real issue about what to do. And every National Statistics Office are faced with that. Faced with that. No, I think people have realised that the only one good thing about the problems with the national statistics recently has made people realise just how important they are. Incredibly important they are. And this big argument about, which I was talking to Sharon about, the use of administrative data, because we were looking at, could we not have the census, which cost £1 billion last time, and replace it by administrative data? And we're not ready for that yet. But New Zealand's just given up their census. Holland doesn't have a census. Denmark doesn't have a census anyway. It's very much tied up with digital ID, which is another, of course, delicate issue.
That's very good advice. Humility, know what you don't know and know who to ask.
Yeah.
So that's good advice for all of us, really. So there's a question.
Well, in a minute.
So if and when politicians do come to terms with the idea of uncertainty, what impact do you think that would have on politics and the world as a whole?
I don't know. I think the thing that's missing in the world at the moment, I suppose I'm slightly obsessed with this, is trustworthy communication. I mean, social media are full up with untrustworthy communication and just biased messages, selected evidence. Usually there is some evidence, but it's been totally cherry-picked to push a point of view. In other words, persuasive communication. And if politicians still think the way to respond to it is to be even more persuasive, factions are double down on their persuasive messaging, I think it's actually, the empirical evidence suggests that's wrong. Actually, people get fed up with it, and you're not listening to, there will be very extreme voices, but there are also just a lot of people who have got concerns about a lot of things they're hearing about, genuine concerns that people they want to address. And if they're not listened, not addressed at all, people get very cynical and turn to populist politics. So I feel very strongly that, mainstream politics should, here we go again, develop a much more, speak with a lot more humility, and try to develop the idea of trustworthy communication. And the one Honora O'Neill, Baroness Honora O'Neill, ex-headmaster of Newnham, whatever they have at Newnham, is wonderful because she's a philosopher of Kant. I don't know anything about Kant, but she says that, is wrong for authorities to say, how can we get people to trust us? And that happens all the time. I get asked, how can we get people to trust scientists? How can we get people to trust us? And she just says, that's totally wrong. You've got it all the wrong way around. What you should be thinking all the time is, how can we demonstrate trustworthiness? In other words, how can we earn that? Don't just try to persuade people to trust us. Walk the walk. Do it. Be trustworthy. Demonstrate. And then the evidence suggests people will offer up their trust. And so it's such a simple idea to switch responsibility back to the authority that they have to demonstrate trustworthiness, duty ethics, all that stuff. It's so powerful, had a huge influence on the national statistics system. The first pillar of the Code of Practice of Statistics, possibly the dullest document I could ever think of. The first pillar is trustworthiness. So the number one priority for national statistics in the country is to be trustworthy. Now, they may sometimes make mistakes and things like that, but they've got to own up to it, and they've got to try to be trustworthy. So thank you. Yeah, great.
So we're almost out of time, and there are many hands up. I think people will need to come and see you in the buttery.
Can I do a couple of tricks?
I've got one. You can, but I've got one question for you.
Okay.
You've been very philosophical as well as statistical and so on, and it really has veered into the way we lead our life.
Yeah.
With humility and being trustworthy as a person. But I want to ask you, what is the meaning of life?
Oh, that is really me. Sorry, this is really me. She asked before, what's the worst question you had? And at a recent talk, I was asked, what is the meaning of life? And you've done it. All I can say, well, I didn't think of saying 42, which is the usual one.
Yeah.
And I'm going to answer it as I answered then. There isn't one.
Okay. There's no meaning of life. Well, we can debate that over the drink.
Debate
I
that
think,
much
yeah.
you want.
So
I'll do my trick.
you want to do a trick? Go on. The last thing we'll do is a trick.
Yeah.
Go on then.
So a couple of things. So this is the business of constitutive luck and constitutive luck. And I think I've even got some slides on this. Yeah, constitutive luck. Because I said how important it is who you're born as, and so you're left with the idea that you've got to make the best of the hand you've been dealt. And I really like that analogy because we're all unique. Sharon could tell us about that. Just as every shuffle is almost certainly unique. So I got to shuffle the cards here. I've shuffled these lots of times, and I am absolutely confident, I bet all the money in the world, that nobody in the entire history of humanity has ever had the cards in this order before. Never been done. And I'm going to shuffle them again, and I can say with absolute, not logical confidence, but as confident as anything I could be of absolutely anything, that nobody in the whole of humanity has ever had cards in that order before. Not only that, but no two proper shuffles in the whole history of humanity have ever been the same. They've all been different when they're properly shuffled. Now that's quite difficult. Yeah, a bit of skepticism there. I get a feeling that people aren't believing me. Okay, how many shuffles are there? So the first card can be any one of 52. Follow the maths. Second one can be any one of 51. Third one can be any one of 50. And so the number of shuffles multiplies up, and you get what's known as 52 factorial. 52 factorial is quite a big number. Yeah, it's quite a big number. Actually, no, it's a bit bigger than that. No, I haven't quite. No, it's a bit bigger than that. Yeah, no, it's bigger than that. Oh, I forgot a few zeros. So that's how big it is. That's how big it is. So it's staggeringly, if you try doing this on your phone will explode. So it's a wonderfully big number. Now, I've been trying to explain, it's about the same as the number of atoms in our galaxy, is how many shuffles there are. So the chance of getting two the same is just ridiculously small. And I was trying to think of how to explain that number. And do you know where I got my analogy from? TikTok. There's a guy on TikTok who did the most brilliant explanation. If you were doing one shuffle a second, how long would it take to work through all those possibilities? Okay, so the first thing is, you have to think that you wait 1 billion years and then you take a step. And then you wait another 1 billion years and then take another step. And another billion, and you walk right around the world. And after you walk right around the world, you take one drop from the Pacific Ocean. And then you do the whole thing again. Billion years, billion years, billion years, billion. One drop from the Pacific Ocean, and then you wait till the ocean is empty. And then you take one piece of paper and you put it on the ground. And then you do the whole thing again. Billion years, billion years, billion years, drop, drop, drop. And you put another piece of paper on the ground until the paper reaches the sun. Billion years, billion years, billion years, drop, drop, drop. Paper, paper, paper. And then you repeat the whole thing 100 times. And then you've covered all the shuffles. So that's why, because that's the chance. If you were waiting for a particular shuffle to come up again, that's the expected amount of time you'd have to wait if you were doing shuffles around them for your shuffle to come up again.
Are you going to teach us how to do?
So I think that's pretty good. Okay. Anyway, and finally, final trick. Final trick. I want to know whether you're lucky. Hey, could you get your phones out and get the calculator out of your phone? If you've seen this before, don't groan. Get your phones out and find the calculator bit on your phone. I want to know who's lucky. Have you got your phone? Get your calculator, and what you want to do is put a 3-figure number in that you think is quite lucky for you. 1, 2, 1, 4, 6, 3, or something like that. Just put 3 figures in that you think is quite lucky. Now, put them in again, double luck. So now you've got a 6-figure number with 3 and then 3. Right, now I'm going to ask some questions. If I asked a group of people what they thought was their lucky number, what do you think would be the most common reply? 7, right. Divide your number by 7. Do you get a whole number? Yes, you're lucky. Okay, if I asked them what do you think their unlucky number was, what do you think the most common reply was? 13. Divided by 13. Do you get a whole number? Right, okay. So I want something in between, but I want, they're both prime numbers, 7 and 13. So what I really want is a prime number between 7 and 13. 11. Could you divide it by 11? Did you get your lucky number back? Okay, so you're all really lucky if you can do that. Thank you very much indeed. So I should say, I'm signing and flogging books, and half price. It's only 11 quid, which is what I pay for them. So I'm not making any profit.
So please join me to thank you for just a kind of stellar evening. I haven't had so much fun for ages. And I'm sitting on the platform, so that says a lot. But David, this is really tremendous. I've so enjoyed it. And so a round of applause.
Thank you both. Thank you.